The Eternal Series Radio presents The Nephelium by author Nathan Parks. Copyright 2013, Chapter 2, read by author Nathan Parks. Chapter 2. Eve watched Kadar go. He seemed to be a very interesting man, and maybe at a different time she would have spoken a little more with him, but not tonight. He had acted paranoid when she asked the meaning behind his tattoo, and made her want to do some recreational research. Maria looked at Eve strangely and just shook her head as she got up to start the closing of the cafe and move the last few patrons out the door. She watched, year after year, as Eve seemed to become more lost. The young lady knew nothing about her parents. All she knew was she was brought to an orphanage by a lady who was told to deliver her there, and that she was not a true orphan, but her parents would soon come to get her. They never did, and it was almost worse than having amnesia, being an individual longing to know who she was and where she came from, only to discover nothing but emptiness. After a while, that emptiness became her identity, and it was hard to separate herself from it. Eve leaned back against the cushion in the booth and allowed her eyes to close. The quiet sounds of the few conversations that were still taking place around her became a drone in her ears. She had to find a moment when she could just breathe, a moment that was hers. She finished off her dark brew and decided that she might as well head home. This night wasn't getting any easier. She had really wished she could have talked to Alfonso tonight, but there would be other nights. She got up and made her way out of the cafe, saying her goodbyes and well wishes to Maria. The stars were still somewhat visible past the city lights. It was time to get home and crash. Eve began to make her way back from the direction she had come earlier. She had no idea that from across the street, within the shadows of an alley, two dark and ominous figures were watching her as she turned in the direction of her loft. They both were of medium height and build. Their dark clothing kept them hidden well. They eyed her with eagerness as a dark, enthralling desire that reeked of havoc and intrepidness permeated them. "She looks harmless," one stated with a nasal tone to his voice. "What say we go and just beat everything out of her?" "Can't do that, Drake." "Why not?" "Bosses don't want us to. We're supposed to only look for potential familiars. Let's face it, it's all we can do. Ain't like we have powers. We ain't even the real thing." Cadet looked down at his hand and touched the rune tattoo upon it. It was a symbol that indicated his bond to his master. He was promised power and strength, but for now, he was stuck being a familiar. A do-as-I-say boy. One day, though, he would feel the full power of being one of them. Okay, so he could never be fully one of them, but his metamorphosis into a halfling could take place once he showed his true loyalties. Cadet found it ironic how the comic books and dark graphic novels that he read as a boy about vampires and monsters had it all wrong, but yet so right. He would never forget the look upon his pervert uncle's face when his uncle walked in for their secret time and found his weak victim of a nephew protected by a shadow of a figure. With a beast-like scream, the figure had projected his shadow upon his uncle, tearing at his body. His uncle never came close to Sadat again, and that was the night an abused boy realized the darkness embraced could become power beyond mortal understanding. He was introduced to his master and brought into the family. Vampires may not be real, but the truth was so much better than myth. A noise behind him brought him quickly out of his trance of thought, and he turned quickly to see what or who might be coming up behind the two. He didn't see anything right away. Drake let out something that sounded like a hiss as the culprit of the interruption took shape before them. "What do we have here?" the female figure questioned, with a cool, calm collectedness. If it isn't two wannabes, two familiars. You have no right to us, Guardian, Sadet vehemently responded. You may be right, but where there are familiars, there usually is a fallen somewhere nearby, she answered while casually looking around. Drake had never actually run into a Guardian before, so he stood transfixed, not sure what to do. He wasn't even sure what power the Guardian was able to use against the followers of a fallen. Our master has us sent out on a scouting trip tonight, Drake attempted at an explanation. This brought a hard slap across the back of his head from Sadet. Shut up, you stupid idiot, yelled Sadet. You didn't give information to Guardians, especially to her. Drake rubbed the back of his head as he turned to his counterpart. I don't care what I do or don't do. Don't you ever hit me like that again. You're not above me. And as for her, pointing toward the stunning but dangerous-looking Guardian in front of them, who's she? This is Leah, Sadet said, not taking his eyes off the warrior of the Alliance. She's not only a Guardian, but also a leader in the Alliance. The Alliance had been created as a force with which to reckon in regards to the continual growth of the fallen and its break-off families of darkness. It consisted of angels of several categories and of humans who had been granted by Jah special strengths and visions. Since its creation, the Alliance had grown in number and had become a strong, supernatural force within the spiritual battle. Sadet, how is your master these days? How close are you to a metamorphosis into an avatar? Or has he promised you full halfling status? Ariok is strong, Guardian, and what he promised me is none of your concern. His vengeance is strong, and my day will come. Uh-huh, she spoke, knowing all too well that this human was nothing but a pawn to his master. Leah was of average height, with shoulder-length blonde hair and vibrant green eyes. Her cheekbones were defined enough to present firm facial features, but her skin had a soft glow, thus accenting her strong, feminine appeal. She was dressed in her typical sleeveless black shirt with black pants that had several pockets built into, holding anything she might need in order to fight a fallen. Tonight, she had also put on her long black coat. Unknown to the familiars, her katana was in its sheath, hanging across her back. Many Alliance members had weapons that were invisible to mortal eyes, unless in use. Leah had been a member of the Alliance since the War of the Serpents, even turning down a position within the Arch-Council so that she could continue to stay at the grassroots of it all. She had been told that there were several Watcher volumes of records of her deeds going back from the institution of the Watchers. Of course, she only had to rely on word of mouth, because the Alliance was forbidden to have knowledge of what was written. There was no room for any of the Alliance, or any of the other direct line of angels, to gloat and allow any pride. Pride was what caused the morning star to fall. It was not for glory that they did their job, but instead for the will of the One who brought them into existence. True, the fallen could not see it that way, but then again, the fallen had their own way of doing everything. Sadet, I'm in no mood to see you around tonight. Get back to your hole, or whatever it is that you crawl out of each day. If I see you any more tonight, know that I just won't have patience. Sadet made an obscene gesture towards her, toward Leah, and motioned for Drake to follow him. They disappeared into the shadows without another word, and Leah found herself standing alone with a smile on her face. She looked up toward the top of the buildings she was standing between and saw the figure's silhouette. Everything is clear down here, Kai. I will meet you later. Troy should be in his usual place tonight. Her team was on the move tonight, and no matter what the Fallen thought they were going to do tonight, they would have a hard time doing anything without some conflict with the Alliance. She was thankful those two small annoying problems had not been foolish. She was tired of familiars. There was a growing number these days of humans who, for each their own reasons, were looking for escape, power, or family. It really didn't matter what it was, but it seemed somewhere they would become prey to the demonic lineage of the fallen. Throughout centuries, stories and legends had grown out of it all, and this had even driven people to see if these stories were true. Stories of bloodsuckers and clans of darkness with immortality to fuel their every move. Even creatures in the dark that were part man and part wolf. All of this had been wrapped up in hardbound books and created to be a fantasy that could be lived out in the dreams of unwanted teenagers and torn-up souls. The truth to it was so much more scarier than anything any mortal could imagine, other than the few who had become witness to it. There were clans, and then there were immortals, and even a war that was raging. And yes, the darkness welcomed any who would follow and promise so many empty promises to the humans who desired to be drawn in. The familiars, each one of them, allowing their soul to become a loan to the fallen, who brought them into the family or clan. Once any human went that far, there rarely was ever a turning back. Leah sighed as she leaned against the damp brick wall at her back and watched the mortals walking the street and going about their lives. There was so much they didn't know. But it was for the best. There was so much to all of this. She didn't feel sorry for them because even if she could be an angel and not know half of what she did, maybe she would have more to look forward to. What was the saying? Ignorance is bliss, she whispered. She straightened herself, stretched, and then headed into the night.